Hi, today I'm going to show you how you can build your own Webflow CMS alternative, keep hosting your website on Webflow, but use Wized and Xano as your backend, and CMSish as the framework, together with Cloudflare workers, to have a no-code Webflow CMS alternative where content hosting is incredibly cheap, inexpensive, scalable, and super easy to navigate. And that same thing will work with Airtable, for example, or with any other REST API or database like Firebase and so on. So you're not focused on CMS anymore. You don't have any CMS limits using that. And you can really build custom and even AI-generated pages without having to host the page on Webflow or CMS. So we're going to do that. It's a great way to incorporate native data, and it's a great way of using Wized to really extend the functionalities. So let's actually start with where our data is hosted. In this example, I just have my data hosted on my Xano database. And this is a really great, easy to use database. You're just going to create this table and add data in here. And then I just have two endpoints, one to get the individual post, which is just an endpoint receiving in the body the slug, which is like Webflow CMS, where I, of course, have to add a valid slug in here. Let's do this right now. Let's take idea to AI SaaS. Let's put this in here. And we're going to get our data back, which we then will be able to use to render this in our CMSish page, and so on. And we have the same thing to get all posts, just like that, which is a GET request in Xano. And this is basically helping us replace Webflow CMS. And for the SEO geeks in here, we even have a dynamically populated sitemap XML file, just like that, that will automatically show all the latest records in your database to make sure that those pages can be indexed by Google on a dynamic basis. So let's get right started. And yeah, let's jump into Webflow and let's build that basically. So what I need to do is I have my home page in here. I need to create a separate sub page for post so that when I go to my page from Cloudflare, very important because this is where we have done the setup. I just really quick go to edit code so I can open that page just like this. If I now go to open this page, I can go to post, and I will be going to the post page with the Latin text. And then I can do / my ID, which will be the ID that will be then taken by Wized from the path and be sent to Xano, like in the slug as we did in the endpoint, that will return the data that will then be rendered in the page. Now, if I go on here, there is no 404, there is no error. We're just keeping this path in here for Wized to grab it, call Xano, Xano will deliver us the data, Wized will package that, and then visually show it on the page. This is our plan for this. So now we just need to have a very simple setup. We're going to add a rich text field. We're going to add a combo class on here of isHidden to have this with an opacity of 0, so that when the data is being loaded, we just have a nice fade-in animation, which we don't have for Webflow CMS. But since we're using Wized, we can go fancy here. Perfect. And then we're just going to add a Wized attribute of post content on here. Now you can name this however you want. I just like to name my Wized attributes camel case, but you can name them however you want. They just have to be together. There cannot be any spaces in between. But then we just have our holder holding the text, and that is just it. And then we just have our normal page. Important is though, this needs to be on a sub page like /post, because this will be our path that will contain this template page, and everything after the first param will be used to basically index this page like a query param, but nicer looking, just like that. And if you're wondering how are we going to do the setup in Cloudflare, I made a whole video about that, and you can check that out in the video description right below. But yeah, let's get actually started with everything. So right now, let's go to this rich text field, and let's already apply a combo class of isHidden on there, so that when this loads, we can just programmatically remove that class and then show this fade-in animation once our Xano request has been finished. So now, after this is successfully published, we want to go to Wized, and we want to go to our post template page, just like this. And I'm going to go to, actually not yet, let's configure our app first. So in Wized, we can add apps. This is where we were going to get the data source. In this case, it will be Xano. This will be our database. Or it can be any other source. There are like open source or public source APIs that provide you with news. So you could build a news website without having to host anything yourself and rank for all those SEO keywords without even having to store that data yourself. You can just use those APIs. So Wiz is really a scalable thing for that. And then you can have that dynamically work maybe by populating like something like a sitemap XML. So there are really wonderful solutions here. But let's add an app here for Xano, just like that. And let's call this Xano block, because you can add multiple apps. So you can have one app for Supabase, one app for Xano, one app for OpenAI, and so on. And let's add REST, because Xano is a REST API. And then we're going to write return, and we're going to start the strings. So now I have my endpoint group in Xano here for my database, and I'm going to click on copy base URL. This is the base URL that will contain all my endpoints related to this group. Think of it like a folder. If you have a folder, you have multiple files in the folder. This is the folder, and then we can just use different paths to then access different files in the folder. So now we just have added our Xano integration as an app, and now we can create a request. Let's create the first request to get the individual block post. So let's call this get post, just like this, because this is what we're mainly interested in, because this is how our technology works. And then later on, we're going to a little bit play around with something else. So I have this called get post. I'm going to go to my Xano app, and I will be defining the endpoint URL. So I'm going to write return, and I need to only get the path. So get individual post in this example, just like that. And now I'm going to paste this in here. So we're calling the get individual post endpoint. I'm going to use the get method, and I need to add a URL parameter. In this case, it is Slack. And I'm going to write, and actually, now we got to be creative here. So in this example, like we have with user in the previous video, we want to create a parameter variable assigned to the post. So let's call this post underscore ID, just like that. And I'm going to paste the starter code in here. And we have the path, we have the split, and now I'm going to base this on post. So this is basically what it's doing. All the parameters, all the paths, not parameters, but all the paths that I have in there are going to be splitted by the /, and the thing that is after post will be then used to be saved in this variable as our identifier to do the request to Xano. So let's rename that, because we call this user index. Let's call this post index, and let's make sure also to call this post index. And when we return user ID, let's rename this to post ID, and let's rename this to post ID so that we return the post ID just like that. And we need to update that to post index, and we need to update this again to post index. So we have post index, post index, post index, post ID, post index, and so on. Perfect. That works. Wonderful. And we want to do this computed because we want to make sure that this runs on any dependencies. If I change the URL, I want to be able to immediately update that variable for potential recalculations instantly. So now I'm going to write return, and I will be basing my request on the post ID, just like that. That will be the thing that will be within the path. That is all that you need to do. So now let's actually comment this out real quick, and let's just return something that we have already in the database for testing purposes. So I'm going to go to my database. I'll take this idea to AI SaaS. I'm going to paste this in here, and let me do the request, and let's see if I get any data. Okay, wonderful. I just got that. So now I want to start configuring this page. So let's go on X-ray mode right here, and let's go to post content. Let's go on set text, set HTML, because we're going to use a rich text field. Let's write return, and let's go to our get post data. And we have this data content, just like that. Wonderful. And actually, we have it as markdown. I'm sorry. So we want to render this as markdown in here. So if I'm going to re-render this, we will see that it's already rendering the data in here as it seems. And let's double check on that. It says markdown. It should look, oh, we have to do the request first. And then, of course, it will render that. So now we don't see any data in here yet, because as you remember, we have the isHidden class on that. So now we want to go to this element again and add another Wized action that is called setClass. I will be adding isHidden, and I will be writing return, and I will be writing return, and we're going to do status equals 200. Or actually, no, we want to do something different. We want to use the OK, where it says true, and we just want to reverse this. So then when the request has been successfully executed, we're going to show the block content, and if not, we're not going to show it. This will look something like this. When I request the request, we're going to have the content fade in. Now, since we're going to render this dynamically, we see that we have some flashing here, the way, or not some flashing, some height adjustments. So we may also want to have that block holder fade in potentially, but we don't really need that. So one thing I like to do is I just set a minimum height of 45 rem to this component so that it starts rendered like this, and then we just have the text fade in inside of here. So we have the component like this, and the text just fades in the moment the data is being loaded. Now the issue is if I visit this page, I have to manually trigger the request to get the data. So what we want to do is we want to add another action. Let's call this load request, and I will want to base that on an event-based action, and I want to base this on page finishes loading, just to make sure that the request can get successfully executed. And then I want to do perform request, get posts. Now if I'm going to reload the page, you're going to see that we're going to render our data dynamically. Now if speed is something important for you, you may want to update this to page starts loading. That will be way faster because the request will be executed way faster. Now, sometimes, if there's a bad internet connection, it may not be loaded fully because it will execute before the page has been successfully loaded. But from my experience, I can recommend you page starts loading is fully okay if you don't have a website with 85 Webflow animations in them. But yeah, here you go. There you got it. And this is loading incredibly fast. It's not coming from the Webflow CMS. So now we got this setup working. Now we want to update our request to work with our path variable. So we're going to return the hard-coded string, and we're going to go with our return v.postID. So now if I go to my domain in here, and I will be adding the slug from the database. Ooh, I just moved my screen a little bit. And I'll be copying that, and I'll be visiting this page right in here with this extension. We should be loading this content, and it looks like a real domain. Look at that. Besides that, I'm going to use the free Cloudflare domain. Just ignore that because I don't have that connected to my domain yet, but you can connect that for free with your domain. I have post/idea to AI SaaS, and I have my post in here. Now if I go to my database, and you can add million records to the database, it's incredibly cheap to host that, and even free in some instances. I can go in here, I'm going to change the path to best AI tools, and just like that, I'm going to have a different post. And then I can go to Xano for beginners. Just like that, let's go in here, let's change the path to Xano for beginners. And we see that we have a different post in here as well. And I can go to Webflow to web app. I can go in here, let's update the path, just like that, and I will be seeing Webflow to web app, just like that, and you will be using Wized to do so. Isn't that amazing? You can have your CMS, like CMSish solution, using Xano and Wized, and you have such wonderful links that are easy to share and fully intuitive to use. It's just amazing. And the next video will be all about metadata and how to make this an SEO craze and how to make this super, super amazing for social sharing and all of that. But this is the base foundation here. So now you may ask yourself the question, what about CMS collections? I need to render those. I know this sounds amazing, but I need to have my CMS collection. So since it is a little bit of a different setup to do the CMS collection using Wized, I will be doing that together with you now, step by step, from Webflow to Wized, even to the Xano path. So let's create a new page, or we could even add this on the home page. But for now, actually, let's just create a new page, and let's call this overview. Overview, just like that. And I'm going to click on create. I have my overview page. I'm just going to style my body just like that. And here we go. I'm going to get rid of those. Let's remove the isBlock class. And let's just really quick just add like a grid in here. Let's add a grid. Very simple. Let's make this full width 100% and a height of 100%. Maybe not a height of 100%. And I'm just going to add like, I think 3 rows sounds good. And I'll be just adding like a div block in here and going to style this a little bit. So let's just give it a nice color, just like that. A little bit of a rounded corner style. Let's add a combo class of has small border, just like that. And let's change the border to like 1 rem, or maybe 1.5, 1.5, 1.5. I mean, you probably know how to do that better than I do, but here you go. And now in Wized, we want to have, let's just actually call this post item, and we have a little bit of a different approach. Now, instead of designing multiple at the same time in the editor, we're just actually going to only design on one item. So for this first item, let's actually add a Wized attribute of Wized item. Just like that. This is our list item. Maybe even let's call this list item, just so that we know it's the list item. Now inside the list item, I want to add a photo, for example. Just like that. Let's add an image. Or actually, do I have images in the database? I don't have. So we're going to skip the image. We're going to do the image next time once I have image in my database. So for this one, we're going to be very simple and minimalist. I'm actually just going to copy this heading in here. Perfect. So we have our heading in here and we have the post item. Again, not a designer. This is a very, very simple example. So I'm going to give this a side border of 2 rem, 2 rem, 2 rem. I don't really know why, but all experts tell me to do it that way. So I'm going to duplicate that. Let's call this post heading, just like that. And yeah, I got my post heading working. And yeah, here we go. So now let's just actually call this heading. Perfect. Let's save this. Wonderful. And let's actually also add a Wized attribute to the heading. We're going to add Wized post item heading, just like that. Wonderful. And I have my post item heading in here. Isn't that great? So now I'm going to go to Wized. I'm going to go to my overview page, and now, again, just ignore my styling. I have this dynamic items in here. So I'm going to go to the list item, and I want to render a list. So in order to do that, we need to have an endpoint, or we need to have a request in Xano that spits us out all the things in our table in here. And thank God we have one. We call this get post. So this doesn't require any information to be added. It's just returning us all the posts. And we can add filters on there just like a CMS collection. So I'm going to copy this path of get posts. I'm going to call this get multi posts, just so that I know what I'm doing here. I'm going to write return at the endpoint in here, just like that, the path. I'm going to go to do a get. I'm getting all the data, and now I'm rendering my collection list. So let's go back to the list item. Let's go to the section render list. I'm going to write return. Now we're going to get our get multi-posts. So I'm going to take the first item here that contains the array, the list of posts. I will be rendering the data list of all my posts. I'm going to create a plus or use of one of my existing iterators. Let's call this iterator return, and we're going to start this at 0. Now we're going to save it and apply my iterator, just like that. Now if I'm going to reload, we see that the moment I perform this request for get multi-posts, I'm going to have my CMS list in here. So we're going to do the same thing for load posts, just like that, to then have an event-based action to when the page starts loading, and conditional when the path of the page, let's do return when the path of the page, this one, equals /overview, because we only want this to happen on the overview page, just like that. Oh, we're going to do equals, so meaning if this equals overview, we are going to perform the request of get multi-posts, just like that. So now every time I visit the page, we're going to get the request for multi-posts. Now, if I know that I may have some content flashing or I want to improve the experience, I can always do this little trick for is visible, for example, at this class on here. Make sure to copy that. And I can, or is hidden. Let's do is hidden, just like that. And we already have this combo class for is hidden. Now I'm just going to apply a transition of like 400 milliseconds for all properties. And now when this is hidden, we just have this fade out, and we have it fade in when our database request for the CMSish items has successfully executed, just fade in. So right now we don't have this at all. So we're basically going to go to add a Wized attribute on this CMS list. Let's call this Wized CMS list holder, just like that. I'm going to add that on my CMSish list holder. I'm going to go to X-ray mode. I'm going to go to my CMSish list holder. I'm going to go to set class is hidden, return, and now I'm going to do the same OK technique for get multi-posts. So I'm going to do OK, and I'm going to reverse this with the exclamation mark, just like that. So every time I load the page, the request, we see this wonderful fade-in transition happening. So now let's go to the item, and we render that item. Now on click of this item, so on event, and we're going to do click. We want to open a page, so we want to navigate to our path page. Actually, we can just update the path. So actually, let's do this as a run function, where we're going to write return path equals / post plus, just like that, plus, and I'm going to take for the current iterated item, so I'm going to go to my get multi-posts, and I'm going to look for the slug. I have the slug in here, and I'm going to apply the v iterator on here. Now the v iterator has a big advantage. If I use the v iterator, if I click on the first item, it will open the first item. If I click on the third item, it will open the third item. This is what the v iterator is doing. So right now, of course, it's going to the 404 because it's not on the reverse proxy setup, but this is completely fine. We can work with that. So now, if I'm going to go back to our overview page, I may have to reload Wized, just like that. And let's go in here. Let's go to overview. Overview, just like that. And I will be clicking on the first item. I will be going to... Oh, I will be going to a wrong path. I don't have a slash on there. So let's actually solve that thing. That was my bad. I need to go in here. I need to do post slash. And then we have the slug for the dynamic item. So now let's try this again. This should work. So let's go to overview, just like that. I'm going to click on the first item, and it's going to open this wonderful custom CMS page that is just wonderful. Look at that. I can click on a different item, and it's opening a different page. I can click on, and you may want to change the original Latin text to plain text or nothing, just to not have this pop up on some browsers like Arc. But look at that. We have our dynamic CMSish setup just in here with wonderful transitions and real looking links. Now the only thing left for us to do is to go into X-ray mode and set the preview text just like that. Let's do set text, plain text, return. We're going to go to the iteration item, just like that. And now you're going to see the miracle of the v iterator, because right now you can see everything is saying the same name. But if I'm going to add the v iterator, which I have assigned to the list that I'm going to render to the list item right in this part, once it is assigned, it's going to take the dynamic text and assign it to the dynamic item. So now I will see that after Wized has done its magic of propagating that, I will have my CMS items in here. I can click, for example, the top 15 tools. I will have my blog post in here, and it is a wonderful, easy to remember, shareable, real path-based link, fully built in Wized and Webflow. So I'm excited to see what you're going to build with this wonderful tech stack, with this wonderful setup. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for all your time. I really appreciate your support. And as always, see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.